Thank you, Raji, and thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. And thank you for staying with us until the end of the day. This is the last session before they bring the wine out, so we're nearly there. All right, so in today's session, we're going to be talking about the evolution of online search. So for the last 20-odd years, we've been conditioned to do online search by typing in some keyword searches in Google or other search engines, getting a list of blue links, going through those links, reading that information, synthesizing that information, and creating our own response. And it turns out that large language models are exceptionally good at this task. So what we've seen is that there's a large number of search that's moved from traditional search engines to these newer AI chatbots like Perplexity, ChatGPT, Claude, and others. And this presents both a challenge and opportunity for retailers and brands out there in order to get discovered in these new ways. So in the next few minutes, we'll attempt to scratch the surface on some of these interesting dynamics going on. All right, so I'm Marco Kormann Rodrigues, EMEA Partner Solution Lead for Retail and Consumer Goods. And I'd like to welcome my fellow panelists, Alex and Charli.
Hi.
Alex, would you like to say a few words about yourself, your role, and Harvey Nichols?
Sure, thank you for having me today. Very excited to be here. So I manage and oversee all of our digital marketing channels at Harvey Nichols. That includes both paid and organic search obviously included in that, and maintaining the balance between both paid and organic as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm Charli, Chief Customer Officer for Botify, working with customers just like Harvey Nichols, Alex, to make sure that their brand is discoverable wherever people are searching. And the spoiler alert is, it's not only Google right now.
Yeah. All right, so Alex, you've had a really impressive career in luxury and beauty, managing digital market channels and strategies for some iconic British brands like Jimmy Choo and Agent Provocateur. How has your focus on channels evolved over that time?
I would say that the evolution has come with the practice, with everything in terms of the shift, working with a mono-brand versus multi-brands. It's a completely different approach. So working with a mono-brand, it's about protecting your brand space and your brand equity and preserving that. And when you're working with a multi-brand, not only is it about protecting your brand space, but you're also in competition with the very brands that you're trying to sell as well. So, your ecosystem has evolved. The competition has evolved. There's a lot of noise that you're trying to drown out whilst you're trying to amplify your own brand and the brands that you're selling at the same time. So it's about leveraging both organic and paid to maintain that visibility, as well as driving that commerciality. But most importantly, it starts and ends with the brand. Customers want to be searching for your brand. If they're not searching for your brand, there's no discoverability, there's no visibility.
Yeah. And have you seen a change in how people search for luxury items?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think generally the way that customers are shopping, customer expectation has shifted massively. Said in the last session about instant gratification. It's all about instant gratification and the channels that deliver the instant gratification the quickest. And obviously, organic being one of them, AI being the next. And the way in which the SERP landscape is even displayed now. It starts with an AI overview, and then you have your Google shopping, and so on and so forth. So it's about being able to deliver the right information to the customer at the right time, at the very moment that they're looking for it.
Yeah. And Charli, we often focus on Google, right? But as you said, it's not all about Google. There's a lot of search that happens on Bing. And there's an increasing amount of search that happens on some of these newer platforms I mentioned, like Perplexity, ChatGPT, and Claude. How are you helping your customers get found on some of these newer tools?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be clear. Google's not going anywhere, right? Still accounts for just over 90% of the market share as it relates to search here in the UK. Has dipped in the US just below 90% for the first time in about 15 years, which is super interesting and potentially a signal about a more fragmented search landscape. And I think as marketers, as brands, in some ways that's to be welcomed and to be embraced. I remember one of the sessions earlier talking about a little bit of trepidation, embracing this change, thinking about, right from the top, When is it time to move away from testing carefully and waiting for all of the data to flood in versus stepping into what is really a new reality? You think about the typical Gartner hype cycle, that kind of huge burst of energy and enthusiasm leading to that spike, and then classically you might see a drop. We're not expecting to see that drop in this case. If you think about ChatGPT, 400 million weekly users today, and that's probably a redundant number already because that number is climbing so high. So the challenge we have when we work with the likes of Harvey Nichols and with all of the brands that trust us to partner is really about maintaining and ensuring that we are maximizing that presence on Google. First, making sure and continuing to focus in on the importance of structured data, which can then be indexed by Google. That doesn't change. That is a core principle of organic search. And the great news is that same need to be indexed is absolutely applicable in these more conversational search experiences, the generative AI search engines like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, others that are emerging really quickly. So great news for all the search teams working really hard in our brands today. The core principles haven't changed. It's still about being found. It's still about being relevant and having that same authority. And these principles about being crawlable and indexable so you can therefore appear. I hesitate to use the word rank because position is changing. You mentioned AI search overviews. If you're holding one of these in your hand and you do a search on Google today, it is a very real possibility you won't see any blue links if the AI search overview comes up. That's a massive shift, right? So for us, and especially when I think about luxury retail, what's a great opportunity as we think about this fragmented search landscape is, yes, being discoverable matters. Especially with luxury, the buyer intent can come from a more emotional place. We are looking for what was Zendaya wearing or what bag was she carrying in Cannes. We are thinking about that connectivity with the faces who represent, the ambassadors that represent those brands. That is an emotional starting point versus a more transactional starting point for where am I going to buy my lunch today, right? Very different intent. So discoverability is key. Storytelling, great rich content that these bots can hook into, absolutely massive. And we have to be super conscious as well that, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I think, but what we measure and how we frame that measurement is going to change. And the final point I'll make on this particular question is, we think about discoverability and we think about, let's use ChatGPT, it's the one I think we're all most conscious of as consumers. There is a point at which the data in these models, these LLMs, is not up to date. Right? And at last count, that was somewhere in the middle of last year. They need to augment and supplement that information with other more robust indexes. Bing is a great example of that. They have a partnership with OpenAI. Google and its index is also being called upon by these new engines. So don't ever think for 1 minute that traditional search is dead. Being present in all of those indexes will also help you in this new search world that we're entering.
Okay. Alex, would you like to add to that? So?
I think Charlie's nailed it completely, but I think it's an education process equally at the same time. So working in, different organizations, search means different things to different people. And ultimately, as Charlie has said, it's about being discoverable. It's about making sure that the tools are accessible. It's about partnering with the right people to be able to get you there. And also, fundamentally, it's about building your brand presence, but not just through search. It's through the upper funnel as well. It's about building that brand awareness. Search comes from intent. Yeah. And if you are not funneling money into the upper funnel, the intent is no longer there. That brand search will decline. And thus, your visibility declines.
Yeah, and then that does get into the whole measurement question, right? Yeah. So although the volume may drop off, maybe the intent is higher quality, right? Yeah. So And traditionally, traffic has been that main metric that has been measured and optimized against, right? So how, in this new world, how do you approach this new way of measuring success?
It's a great question, because ultimately, again, success means different things to different people. And, when you're delivering KPIs or lack thereof to stakeholders within the business, it's not just about revenue. It's not just about the visits either. It's about an increase in visibility. It's about share of voice. It's about brand uplift, so brand search uplift. I think if the interest is there over time, people will start to visit. Visits don't necessarily translate into conversion, and obviously conversion is a separate issue altogether. But if you have people who are searching for the brand, that in itself is a story of success.
Yeah. And Charli?
Well, again, gosh, I feel like AI is the only two-letter acronym I'm using these days. With the rise of this more conversational search and the concept of zero-click search, so think of this as a move towards more conversational experiences for consumers. Gone are the days where you would see multiple clicks in that journey, depending on your attribution model, which would lead in the dream state to the conversion. The typical session a consumer might have on ChatGPT today is around 6 minutes. Within that session, that conversation, are a ton of different questions, answers, searches, answers. And we're not capturing clicks from those because it's all happening in this one environment. So it's really important to maybe reframe what does success look like there. Alex, you're right. It is about that discoverability. It's about making sure that when you're discovered, it is the right pages that are able to be crawled and indexed so that they will appear in that conversation at some point. So looking at things like the index rate of valuable pages is important. Thinking about the efficiency of your crawl budget. So think of the crawl budget as being how much bandwidth or capacity is there to allow Google, other bots now from these generative AI engines to come and crawl your website. You need to be able to control where those bots are looking, right? Because otherwise it's a big hit on your infrastructure and there is a cost associated with that. So control is really key there. How well are you controlling that? And do you have a really good unified sense across marketing, IT, and other relevant stakeholders about which bots matter most and which ones you're going to potentially not allow or inhibit from coming to hit your architecture? And finally, I think a newer kind of thought here, and I don't think the data is yet really robust enough to say how this will finally net out, but some kind of measurement of representation in this answer-generating content. So thinking about search content or features, SGE, featured snippets, these kinds of things. We want to make sure that we're capturing and measuring that. But also the old model of citations that we used to know and love in SEO, still important. You will see when you do have a conversation in ChatGPT, hyperlinks starting to become more and more common. You want your brand to be one of those hyperlinks, especially when it's super relevant, going through to a product detail page or equivalent value page for you. We have to stop being so hooked on this traffic. We work with hundreds of brands globally, and a good proportion of those are retailers, and we're seeing enormous anxiety in the boardrooms about decline in traffic. And there's good news and bad news there. I mean, pragmatic news is it's a thing, right? User behavior is changing, and we have to acknowledge that, and we have to understand that that doesn't mean that everything's going to hell in a handcart, right? There are other ways in which we can now think about what is going to ultimately lead to that consumer embracing and engaging with our brand and thinking about making a transaction or multiple transactions because we love a bit of loyalty. So we have to start moving away from that traffic hook and start to think about signals of consumer intent at each stage of that search funnel that indicate that there is going to be a business impact at the end, i.e. a conversion or multiple conversions. We could start then measuring, you talked about conversion being a whole other story. Yeah. It is. What happens on those pages when people land? Conversions per indexed page, that's a real metric to look into. Engagement on the priority journeys that happen in app-like experience, for example. For those of you who have apps, think about the journeys that matter most and talk about measuring and tracking what happens in the engagement touch points in those journeys, and look at how they change over time as you prioritize more discoverability there. And finally, I would say, again, the other word we've been hooked on is ranking, right? Where do I rank? Hands up in this room if someone with a C in front of their title has said, what position is my favorite search today, right? I think we've all been there, or at least heard that discussed. We need to start moving towards another concept that's not so new in search, but that is relevance, all right? So when we think about the relevance of our answer, the content, the products that we can show in response to a search query or a conversation, then how do we make sure it's those most relevant, even if they are super niche pages or products from our website or catalog? How can we make sure those are the ones that are being surfaced at that right moment in the right time? Because not doing that is going to become the equivalent of not having the right food products on the shelf, not having the right products in the warehouse at the moment when it matters most. So that relevance piece and thinking in much more granular levels than we have before is going to become ever more important.
There's certainly a lot to unpack there.
There is. I'm super excited about it as well.
So for retailers and brands out there, I mean, where would you recommend they get started then as a final thought?
Use your first-party data. One of the things we do working with Alex and the team and other customers is we really try and surface the value of the logs that you own, that show exactly what was happening in terms of the search term, the page that search term landed on, what happened beyond that. Those logs are gold, and they're becoming ever more important now. At Botify, we're able to show sources of traffic far more, as I said, more fragmented than it was before. Google, Bing, maybe a couple of other smaller players. Now we're looking at 13, 15 different bots that are driving traffic of some sort, engagement, let's call it, of some sort through to our customers' websites. Before making those decisions about which ones matter and which ones don't, which ones should we prioritize optimizing content for and which ones will we not, go to the data you already have. It's in your logs, and we can help with that as well, and we do that regularly with our customers on a daily basis. That stuff is gold, especially in the absence of a world where there's no robust analytics portal to go to. We've all become very hooked on that in advertising and in Google, of course. That doesn't exist yet across these new experiences, these new generative AI search engines. So super, super important to understand that you sit on the goldmine of information. And yes, it's very hard to capitalize on tons of disparate data, but those logs are a great starting point. Understand where your traffic's coming from.
Yeah, excellent. And Alex, any final thoughts or predictions?
I think that Gen AI is going to have an impact on paid channels as well. That's why I see it going. I think, in terms of Google Shopping, we will see a similar trend with Gen AI, and that will definitely disrupt the paid space as much as it's disrupting the organic space. And I think it's going to happen before people are prepared for it, in the same way that it's already disrupting so many retailers, and we're not, a lot of them are not ready. Obviously, working with Botify, we have a strong roadmap in terms of what we're working towards, and it's very exciting. But I know that before we even get to the end of that, suddenly paid is going to be, it's going to be up there as well. So.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's clear that this is a fast evolving area, right? And search looks like it will be fragmented. As you said, the old search won't go away completely, but retailers and brands definitely need to get ahead and start considering how to evolve in this new world and think about how to measure success as well going forward. Yeah. Well, thank you both for fascinating discussion. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you.